Week 4 at the IMS road course kicked off 2023 in spectacular fashion, with Eduardo Leo leading us across the line in the BMW V8 Hybrid. Today, though, we take a trip over the Atlantic to a newer venue in the world of iRacing, and that is, of course, the French circuit of Magny-Cours, a circuit renowned for its history and its difficulty. This will be one to remember, I am sure. And to talk you through all of the action will be myself, Zach Sween. I've got super sub William Chadwick alongside me, with Yuki Mericala behind the scenes. And Will, welcome in. IMSA always has a surprise.
Oh, absolutely. And with it being 3 classes this season, I'm very much looking forward to this race. Of course, but all classes look really evenly split across the SOF iRacing's balance of how good each driver is. So I think we're going to have a good race today, and we've got a decent grid of 33 cars across all 3 classes.
We do indeed. And of course, numbers are quite important, but they don't tell the full story. It's good to have a nice populist grid, though. It just, I don't know, it feels more of an achievement if I've won. Not that I've ever win, because I'm not. I'm horrible at iRacing, and I'm sure you can relate with that, Will. But it just feels better to do better in a grid where there's more cars. Like, if you win a race with 5 drivers, it's like, oh, cool. fantastic. But if you want to race with like 30, it's like, oh, cool, this is all right, to be fair. But again, that's just me. I don't know. That's personal preference. I certainly, from a commentary perspective, would rather have 5 drivers really, really close and fighting it out and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I'm waffling on. But yeah, we have got a really good race set up. And of course, last time out at week 4, we took to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. That gave us some fantastic action. We're here today, of course, at Magny-Cours. Then we go back to the Americas with Daytona, Long Beach, Virginia. Then back to Europe for the Nürburgring, which should be a fun one, really, in the IMSA racing layout. Red America, of course, back to the Americas to round off the three-race sprint of week 10, 11, and 12, with Detroit and Sebring to round off on the 3rd of March. A pretty good calendar lined up. Me and Cam spoke about this last time out, Will, but there's a good diverse set of circuits there, of course, very American focused, as you would expect for IMSA, but all of them, I think, have a potential for a good race in their own right.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of different varieties. Like you say, you've got the tracks that have the sort of speedways like we had at IMS last time out, and we have next week in your precursor to the Daytona 24-hour, of course, the first proper 24-hour event of the iRacing calendar year. And you have tracks that are so technical like Long Beach, which is a huge challenge for all drivers, and yeah, gives that massive amount of variety.
For sure, and variety is what we want to see over the course of 12 weeks. We don't want to just go to circuits that are very, very similar, because then it just gets boring, a little bit boring, whatever. So it's nice to spice things up a little bit, go into each week. You might be really good, say, at Indianapolis, but then you come to Magny-Cours and you might be a little bit more on the slower side, and yeah, just it varies things up, and that is always what we want to see. Qualifying is in progress as it stands. We're towards the latter stages of that, so as soon as the checker flag waves, we will get you the qualifying results. 45 minutes on the clock, though, today, Will, and we saw last week, again, at the IMS Road Course, a pretty heavy focus in terms of the strategical element. Even though it's only 45 minutes long, there are still a number of different ways you can negotiate the pit lane sequence.
Yeah, and that will be a crucial part of today's race, especially if it's really close at the front, because often an overlooked category with inside iRacing is how you can gain time with inside the pit lane. You know, you can gain up to 2 seconds just by executing your pit lane as good as possible, and that's going to be a crucial part, especially if it ends up being really close at the front today.
Yeah, for sure. It's that thing that makes the difference. Lap traffic as well is, well, again, we saw it at IMS. It really did have everything. Did week 4 of Friday night prime time. It demonstrated everything. I think that is going to be a similar case here at Magny-Cours. It's not the longest lap in the world, only a 1:23.2 for the provisional pole time of Filippo Grandi in the BMW M Hybrid V8. So, of course, not the longest lap in the world, 3 classes and a fairly sizable grid. So they're going to come up on each other's classes. There's going to be a lot of overlap in terms of lap traffic today.
Yeah, and that will be something that I'm really interested to see how we navigate. You know, of course, we've got the really, really tight hairpin, which will be a great opportunity for people to go in up the inside and make a move. But it has to be the tightest hairpin inside of the entirety of iRacing that I've driven in. It's incredibly hard corner, so I suspect we may see a couple incidents there today, but hopefully not. I don't want to see too many crashes, but, you know, sometimes it spices it up.
Sometimes. I mean, maybe you're just very sadistic, Will. I don't know. Again, whatever. I was, well, of course, Will was giving us some fantastic insight over the course of the sort of lead-in 15 minutes into the broadcast, just to warm ourselves up with Magny-Cours, and let's just say he was very, very competitive. We'll gloss over that, though, because we have got the starting grid for today's race. It's Filippo Grandi that takes pole position for the BMW M Hybrid V8. He'll be joined by Mario Varane on the front row, with Sergei Soldatov and Christopher Underwood 3 and 4. Angus Martin rounds off your top 5, and he'll be joined by the 32 machine of Damien there in 6th. Not a very long BMW grid, of course. Then you've got Dylan Frappleton, Robin Berge, and Anderson Kenji to round off not even a 10-car field. Fortunately, let's hope it's going to be quality over quantity. Looking a little bit further down, we'll go to the Dallara LMP2s, and it's Adrian Ladinger that takes pole for them. He'll be joined by his teammate for Undercut Sim Racing of Valentin Boni on the front row. Marion Andre makes it a 1-2-3 for the team, with the 26 machine rounding off the second row. Marcus Putniks rounds off the top 5 with Frederick Anderson 6th alongside him as they barrel their way towards turn number 1. And beyond that, it is, of course, the 31 of Piotr Shilo and Loris Coirel, 7th and 8th. And the 33 and 27 make each other's company on the 5th row and rounding out the top 10 and the final positions of the Dallara P217 category. One more left to go in our 3-class showdown. Here for IMSA, it is, of course, the GTDs. And looking over to those guys, it was, again, a very, very close qualifying session. Only a 10th.5 separating our top 2 of Laurens van Oort and Maximilian Prouvost in 1 and 2. We saw him do quite well in that Lamborghini last time out at IMS. Leon Blum, Mark Hitzman, 3 and 4, with Leo Devolier and Petter Avramdis, 5 and 6. Only about less than 6 tenths covering the top 6, so very, very close. A lot to play for indeed. Harley Keeble, Sean Bennett, 7th and 8th, Tommaso Chiti, and Jürgen Halunen in 9th and 10th. The larger grid for the GTDs, we've got the 18 and 25, 11th and 12th in the Audi and Ferrari, respectfully. Of course, that does extend a little bit further down as well. We've got Christiansen and Emre Center, 13th and 14th. Round off the 7th row and the grid for the IMSA 23, the GTD category. And well, Will, a long, long field. Very, very close in terms of qualifying times, though, for the most part. This is anyone's game.
Yeah, especially in that GTD class, like you mentioned, only a 0.2 of a second separating our top 3-4 drivers. So I predict that will be probably the closest race we get here today. Of course, a fantastic lap by Felipe Grandi on pole in LMDH, over 1.7 seconds clear. I mean, that's an incredible lap. And I'm sure he'll be looking to take that into the race. Hopefully, for our sake, it won't be too much of a runaway affair, but I'm fearing it could be. LMP2 looks close as well. You know, the 3 undercut sim racing teammates are pretty close together, and I imagine that they might have a good little fight as well.
For sure. Now underway for the formation lap, of course. They use this time to separate into their individual classes and settle in. I think, how important is a formation lap? Of course, you've got a lot more of an extensive portfolio in terms of formation lap experience and warming up for a big race. How do you use the formation lap to best prepare yourself going into, say, a 45-minute race?
I think it depends what kind of class you're running. So these LMDHs require a bit more tyre temperature. You know, off the bat, they do have a bit more of a cold tyre effect than let's say, the GTD class. So in order to maximise the performance of the car when starting the race, you might want to get a little bit of temperature in, like we see Filippo managing to do a little bit here. But in GTD, it's kind of the opposite. You're wanting to just keep sure the tyre is on a low pressure, just protect it at all costs, don't take too much out of it. And it's also a chance to settle your nerves at the end of the day because, you know, you're going into a race, you don't want to mess up. You've got to stay focused, get yourself ready, and imagine what you want to happen at the start.
For sure. And do you think it's beneficial potentially to go into, say, the formation up with a target to say, I want to make up X positions, I want to stay firm in this position, etc., etc.? Is that sort of a mentality you carry forward going into the race?
I think you always have a kind of a plan in your head, depending on where you're starting. You know, some people like Freckleton, who didn't quite manage to get a lap in, is probably wanting to stay safe in the initial laps and trying to make his way through the field. Whereas Grandi will be trying to really get away from the field. He wants to make that gap as soon as possible to give himself an easier race as possible in order to secure the win here today, and that 24 iRating he will be gaining if he does so. And yeah, it's good to set yourself targets, especially realistic ones, because that just helps you stay focused on what you need to achieve and what you want to achieve.
For sure. And again, it sort of settles your nerves because you're going in, not necessarily, it settles some uncertainty because you know sort of what you're expecting. Of course, that's not always going to go to plan, etc., but it gives you something to focus on, something to maybe settle the nerves just a little bit. But Filippo Grandi, the way he demonstrated himself in qualifying with such a sublime performance, of course, so far clear of the rest of the field, it's going to be such a shame for him if he gets swallowed up at the start. This, I guess the pressure is on for him to demonstrate in the opening parts of this race the pace that we saw in qualifying.
Yeah, but of course he gets to control it as we see to start him. I thought he was going to start dropping back from the safety car. He will do a little bit. He gets to control the pace as we head round this final corner. So it's all up to him on when he wants to go.
It is indeed into the final chicane. Then he controls the pace before we get underway for week number 5 of Friday Night Primetime, the second week in 2023. We are go here in Magny-Cours. It's a good start from our pole sitter of Grandes. They head their way in towards the first corner of turn number 1. He's very, very closely followed though by Mario Veran in that 17 machine. A bit of carnage a little bit further back. Maybe cars running side by side, but they run their way through the very, very long turn 3 and just trying to settle into this race as best as they possibly can. Not much action in terms of the front runners in the BMW M Hybrid V8s, but also very, very close amongst the P2s and the GTDs. A dominant display so far. Down the inside, though, a bit of a move we're seeing there from Robin Sergi to get himself up an extra place and just trying to make the most, it must be said, of these opening carnage moments, particularly into that very heavy braking zone of the hairpin at Adelaide. You've got to make the most of these opportunities early.
Yeah, and like we said, Grandi has got away really, really well, asserting his dominance at the start of this race. As we look back to the Dallara P217 class, looks like the 3 undercut racing cars have got away cleanly, and at least they're starting to build a little bit of a gap between themselves and the rest of the pack. I'm pretty sure the 4th place car is still within the tow range, but it's definitely opening up in these opening moments.
Yeah, which is not what you want whatsoever. The ideal start is what Filippo Grandi has just been able to pull out. I don't know how he's managed that ahead of Mario Veran, but opening off the first lap, and he is just setting himself up so well. This is exactly what we were talking about in sort of during the formation lap, is that this is such an ideal start for him, is to get a good start, not have to worry about anyone else around you, and just put in laps, because Grandi has proven that in qualifying that is what he is good at. Give him a clear track and he will just go around lap after lap and he will put in the lap times. Of course, it is still a long race, but he's putting himself in the best position possible in order to sort of set himself up very well for later on in this race. And also with this, the lack of pressure means that he's not staring off into his mirrors, he's not getting into any wheel-to-wheel combats or anything like that. He can conserve his fuel, his tyres, which really is going to help him come that pit stop window.
Yeah, and that gap has stabilised a little bit as we go on to this second lap. You know, it's only gone up by a few tenths of a second. So maybe starting to settle in, starting to protect the tyres. Of course, the current tyre model in iRacing does require you to protect the tyre quite heavily no matter what car you're driving. You definitely don't want to be overheating it too much, because that's a really easy way to destroy the tyre and end up in a bad place at the end of the race. And, you know, that's a little bit more important for the GTD class, which of course in this new season has had a completely new tyre model, which requires a lot more conserving than it usually did before.
For sure, a bit of a move being made there between an Audi and the Ferrari as they emerge from Adelaide. Not a move for the lead, of course, but one that, again, that is going to rage on for a long while, I am absolutely sure. Change of the lead, of course, in the P217. Valentin Boni ahead of the pole sitter of Adrian Leidinger, able to catapult his undercut sim racing. You can see there dominant form for 1, 2, and 3, all in formation really, and that is, you know, not that this is, you know, a championship event or anything really on the line other than pride, but for 3 teammates to be in such dominant force, so close together, 1, 2, and 3 leading the way, that is, I mean, it's got to give you some confidence. It's got to be nice to see, like, as a team, like, brilliant. This is what we can do, and we're showcasing that here right now.
Well, of course, when you have teammates, you've got something to go off, and that's definitely what I think Andres definitely took advantage of this week, because you can see that, at least by iRacing's metrics, he's a little bit off in terms of the rating of the front 2, being our number 1 and 2 cars, but it gives you a good sense of how to drive, and you get all your teammates' data, you get your setup, you get his lap times, his or her lap times, so you're able really to perform to your best. So I say that kind of jinxed a bit as we see the number 10 go wide, but we're seeing a little replay here from Leo Devoe on the opening lap maybe in GTD. Oh, it's not a replay actually. Maybe it is. And that was a big shunt. Ooh. Look at that. Oh, and it's a blind corner, that one. It's something that you don't really realise from that TV camera. It's really blind as we see them still continuing to battle away into that corner. That was a scruffy start there.
Yeah, not ideal at all by any stretch of the imagination. It's not what you want to start the race off. Of course, still got 40 minutes left to go, and still a lot left to unfold. Bit of a slide there from Adrian Leidinger out of the final corner. Bit of an Audi off there. Not entirely sure as to who that is. That is Harley Keeble, unfortunately dropping to P10. Make that actually P11 as he has to relinquish that place to the Lamborghini. Again, it's proving that this track is very, very difficult to tame. There's not an extensive amount of tarmac runoff. There's not really much you can rely on other than just the pure track that you've got at play. There's no sort of modern, like Paul Ricard, for example, or whatever. There's nothing like that to rely on. You've got the curbs and you've got grass, and that is it. And unfortunately for him, it wasn't even a case of dipping a wheel onto the grass or anything like that. It was more just carrying a little bit too much speed in, and I think the rear end of the car just wasn't having it.
Yeah, and it's one of those things when you get like unbalanced on a curb, maybe just lifting a wheel, you start to shift the centre of weight, the centre of balance of the car, and it can cause upsets. As we see the LMP2 from the outside here, lapping the first bit of traffic. That was an interesting move. Didn't quite expect that one, but yeah, that's the signal that we are starting to see lap traffic happen, which will cause, I'm sure, a little bit more carnage as we see another Audi go wide. I think that's the number 12 car.
Yeah, I think that was at Keeble. I think we were just following on with as well. Yeah, he has not had a fun last couple of corners, or just last lap really. Unfortunately for him, bit of a fight going on in the LMDH class a little bit further on. I think a fight for fourth. Angus Martin, Dylan Frackleton, Sergey Zol, Tadov, and Christopher Underwood, and Tesla and Damien as well, all in this fight. A bit of a lock up there from Martin allows Frackleton maybe to have a bit of a look, but already approaching, we saw the start of it just a moment ago, already approaching the first wave of traffic. And in a fight as close as this, it's of vital importance to clear the traffic as efficiently and as quickly as possible, purely because if you don't, you are going to get swallowed up by those cars behind, particularly if you're in Martin's position right now.
Yeah, especially with an over 15 seconds a lap difference between the GTD class and the LMDH class. Every second you spend behind that GTD car, you're costing yourself quite a lot of time. So it is important to clear the lap traffic efficiently, effectively, and fast. But I guess that at the end of the day, you don't want to be just launching people and killing people left, right, and centre. So it's a fine balance, and that's, I'm sure, what every GTD driver will always tell you, that they hate the upper classes, but I'm sure it will always be that way.
Yeah, I think for the GTDs, they're not in the best of positions. Let's put it that way, because they've got both the LMP2s and the LMDHs to come through and lap them, and it's very easy to get overwhelming, particularly if you are sort of a little bit newer to endurance racing and multi-class racing and things like that, and how that plays out. It's an interesting dynamic. It's one that has decided races before. It's one that, yeah, it will always throw a spanner into the works if you let it. Speaking of the GTDs, this is the fight for the lead as it stands. Lauren Van Oort and Leon Blum, 1 and 2, separated by about 0.7 of a second, fluctuating around that mark. And the Audi is trying to pile on as much pressure as possible onto that very vibrant Lamborghini. I want to say it's purple, but it's probably pink. Again, do not trust what I say with colours, because I am blind as a bat in that regard. But a close fight for the lead nonetheless, 0.7. And with these GTDs, they can follow each other quite close, and it is just going to be a case of how close Leon Blum can get, how much pressure he can put on, and where those moves start to fabricate themselves. Because around Magny-Cours, they're limited in some regards.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting because Blum has really come into this race over the last few laps. Now gained, I think, like 0.6 of a second in the last 2 laps. 3 the lap before, 2 the lap just gone. And with lap traffic coming into play as well, I'm sure that it's going to be even more tense of a situation for Van Oort at the front of the field. You're going to get a good chance maybe into this hairpin if you can exit the fast corners closely. Like you say, there isn't much dirty air for these GTD cars. There is a bit, so you do have to stay a little bit wary. But I think that going into that hairpin, you could probably send it from about 0.3 back, just with the nature of how hard the braking zone is. So if we see these two get a little bit closer, I'm sure we could see quite a good battle for the lead here.
Oh yeah, for sure, and don't forget about the whole lap traffic thing. This is Christiansen. We're seeing a bit of a replay, and that is what can happen in terms of lap traffic. For him, I think was just following his own line, and we were saying before the broadcast, Will, that last chicane is brutal to do by yourself, let alone when you're being lapped by a class that's 15 seconds quicker. For Tianison, I think he was doing everything right. He was hitting his marks, he was following his racing line, and unfortunately it was the BMW that came sort of sending it up the inside and threw him off just a little bit. Fortunately, not major. Oh no! Well, I say not major damage, and then bang into the barrier. That is unfortunate, and for him, I would say that is the first one. Arguably, yeah, fair enough, was not on him. That one, it looked as though he just sort of steered left towards the side of that BMW.
Yeah, but at least he stopped near the marshal in the end. So I think you get prizes either way. But yeah, I mean, that's why every GTD driver will tell you they hate LMDHs. Of course, the first one I wouldn't say was his fault whatsoever. The second one maybe a lot more so. But yeah, this is the thing that can happen at times when you're racing like this, and just a little tap like that can unsettle the car and send you straight into near the marshal's post. So yeah. Unlucky for him, but I'm sure he'll bounce back in the next place.
Yeah, for sure. We still have a long way to go in terms of IMSA, and for him, he's got the rest of the night, the rest of the week to get a good result here at Magny-Cours. We have got a bit of a fight materialising here, though, for 5th place in the GTDs. We can see now between Vahabovic and Mark Hitzman, between the Audi and the Ferrari. The Ferrari of Hitzman very, very close to the rear end of Vahabovic. I'll get some names right, I promise. At some point during the season, I'll get some right. But again, me and Will both British, so don't expect any miracles whatsoever. But again, very, very close. However, for Hitzman, it looks as though that front end of that Ferrari has taken a couple of hits. How much is that going to affect him? Is that going to be sort of affecting the wheel alignment of sorts, the suspension components, or is that purely just a bit of crumple zone damage?
I definitely say that's going to be a bit of front downforce loss. You know, there's quite a bit of crumple on the splitter, a bit of damage to the bonnet and front bumper. So, you know, you're looking at maybe 3/10 a lap, 2/10 a lap, but what it will definitely make is it much harder to overtake. So, yeah, it's an interesting one, really, and I guess we'll see how it materialises for Hitzman in his challenge for 5th place inside this box.
Well, with the faster prototypes coming their way through, we take a look at another replay. This is Patrick Bruns. Bit of a send. Oh, what happened? Just a bit of a tap to the inside. Unfortunately, he lost his momentum. Fortunately, though, sort of lucky in an unlucky situation, was able to carry on going and maintain the position versus, I believe, the number 11, but has to very quickly tuck back into tow and loses, unfortunately, position. This is the move potentially from Hitzman. Gets squeezed from Vahabovic in towards Adelaide. Oh, my word. Very close to contact. The Audi and the Ferrari emerge side by side as they run their way back down a bit of a flat-out section before you hit the next quick little right flick to the inside for Hitzman. He's going a bit deep, but he's managed to get the corner stuck, managed to hit his marks and hit the apex perfectly, up into 5th place for him. Unfortunately, he's actually sent Vahabovic back into the realms of some other GTD traffic that's really going to help him sort of extend that gap for 5th.
Yeah, well, he's opened the gap up there to 1.9 seconds in a matter of seconds, really, and Vahabovic is also under attack now from Petit, and yet lost another place. So yeah, you can see how sometimes just that one little overtake can cause your momentum to be so impacted, and now it's just a case of recovering, calming down, and fighting back, really.
Yeah, it's so easy to sort of let your emotions get the better of you when things don't go your way. It's like, oh my god, you start to contemplate everything, look back in hindsight, what could I have done better, what differences could I have made, could I have changed that situation, really unfortunate, I got really unlucky, blah blah blah, everyone hates me, playing victim, whatever. It's the best drivers that will just shrug it off, say this has happened, cool, awesome, this is where I am, this is what I've got to do, and that is how you're going to work your way forward. But for Cheesy, just able to make the most of those mistakes and capitalize on them as quick as possible. But that Audi needs to bounce back really quickly, because he's not being bounced off into some clear air. He's straight on the defensive. Oh my word! Masaru in towards Adelaide, nearly squeezed off onto the grass, was indeed squeezed off onto the grass, nearly sent careering into the side of the Audi. Managed to hang on though, But oh my word, for Vahabovic, that was straight on the defensive, and very understandably so, and not very happy Ferrari.
No, I don't think Vahabovic is so calm at the moment. I've heard a few things he's saying over the radio, and I don't think he's very happy whatsoever. And that was certainly an incredibly aggressive move to defend, and I wouldn't I wouldn't condone that to anyone, to be honest. But yeah, sometimes you just do get a bit worked up, and I've definitely been in that situation, so I can feel where he's coming from. But yeah, he really needs to try and control his anger here and fight back against his competition fairly.
Yeah, do it fairly, nice and clean. That's what we like to see. But again, it's easily done. We've all been there. We're only human. You know, we're not going to be perfect machines all 100% of the time. Emotions do happen. They do get the better of us sometimes. Unfortunately, that lead battle that we saw, actually, we'll come back to that in just a second. Unfortunately, Frederick Anderson in the LMP2s has had a bit of an off. He stopped on track, is the 21 machine, I think, escaping back to pit lane. And into the pit lane comes Piotr Chizilo for P9. That is a fairly early stop, only 15, well, just over 15 minutes in. Is that scheduled? I mean, he's going to be able to get to the end of this race, but relative to everyone else, that's really early. Is that scheduled? Is that because he's got a bit of damage? I'm not sure, because last time at IMS, we saw people going really far into this race, sort of, you know, half an hour, 25 minutes, that sort of range. But 15 minutes, that's early.
Yeah, it is early, but I think that you can sometimes make it work. Of course, the car is fastest when it's on its lowest fuel load, so ideally, in an ideal world, you'd want to run it until the end of its fuel tank. But I think depending on the situation you're in, depending on what you're fighting in terms of traffic and stuff, it can be beneficial to pit early. We are watching Liam Blum here, and it's important to note that last lap, he had a large amount of traffic, which has pushed him very far back from Van Aert, who's at the front of our GTD field. We're watching. Oh,
in a bit.
Deary me, I think I would have an heart attack if that happened. Deary me.
Yeah, left foot cramps for Frederick Anderson. I think he did the right thing, though, of just darting to the left and, you know, not letting anyone else pay the misfortune for his mistake. But yeah, back to that point regarding this quote-unquote fight for first in the GTDs. Van Aert really has gotten the better in terms of the draw, with the lap traffic, able to negotiate his way a little bit more cleanly when the prototypes have worked their way through, as opposed to Liam Blum, unfortunately, not getting that same advantage. But of course, there are going to be more runs through traffic as the race progresses. Sometimes you're going to get lucky, sometimes not. And there is Sean Bennett having an off in that Lamborghini. Downhill through the right, a very fast corner as well. It's easy for the weight of the car to shift. Sean Bennett, though, he's not going to be liking the fact that he's now got overheated tyres, a knock of confidence, and quite a way off those that he was fighting a moment ago.
Yeah, and like you say, with the tyre model being so sensitive to slides and overheating, he needs to make sure that he keeps those cool now, because it can be a very, very slippery slope to a lot of tyre wear, believe you me. I think I did a race at IMS Road in the GT3 class, and we'll bring the tyres down by 70%. So you can definitely use the tyre a lot and punish it a lot as we're looking on board. So just going through the first corner, relatively flat in a GTD car. Oh! Yeah, that's a stopped car, or very, very slow car. And to be honest, there's not much you can do in that situation because of the high-speed nature. You can't make too sudden of a movement on the steering wheel, or you're just going to fire it off into the wall. So, yeah, that was really unlucky from Bennett, and I'm sure that they'll hit back though. So we'll see if he can make some progress towards the end of this race.
Yeah, that was a fairly hefty shunt into the rear end of that Audi, it must be said. Yeah, as you say, you're going in out of turn one into that very fast sequence, left, right, before you run through Estoril of turn three. You're going in there very, very quickly, and especially in the GTs, you've not got a lot of downforce to rely on, so you've got to brake in a straight line, you've got to trust the car's going to stick, and if you've got a slow car there, just whack straight onto the apex. You're not going to be having too fun of a time, and Sean Bennett, unfortunately, found that out the hard way. Talking of recoveries, though, Sean Bennett's going to need one. Vahabovic has started on his bid to recover, maybe back into the realms of contention in the GTDs. He's trying to close back in on Maseru for 7th place. He's also got Petter Avramidis just in behind him. A three-way fight materialising for 7th. But it seems that Vahabovic he's got his cool back. He's back into a rhythm. He's settling back in, putting those times in, and you know he's shrugged off that mistake, and now it's crunch time.
Yeah, and like you say, it is important now to make most of that that pace that we know he's had from running in fifth in this race already, and time to really get going and start to make some moves. You know, we're going towards the halfway distance in this race, and it's time to really start making that move back up the field, because you know, although it's 45 minutes, and you know, if you sat in a room for 45 minutes, you think it's a very long time. Trust me, when you're in a car racing rounds at hundreds of kilometers an hour, it does go very, very quickly.
It depends. Honestly, there's some times where it drags on and on and on and on. And 45 minutes turns into sort of what seems like 450 minutes in some cases, particularly, say, if you're fighting very closely for the lead and you're like, I just want this over with. I cannot handle the mental fatigue of having to put up with this fight. Yes, of course, it's always fun to have those fights for the race lead. I always love them. I'd rather win by sort of half a tenth than by 10 seconds. It's always so much more fun to have those fights, but it's so much more draining to have to constantly focus on it, and very quickly 45 minutes turns into a very long time. But again, it switches on itself. If you're the attacking car, those 45 minutes do not last long at all. You seem as though your opportunities just go like straight away like that. So time is a very funny thing, depending on what situation you're in. But yeah, 45 minutes relative to what these cars we've seen over the course of multiple series in iRacing have done. 45 minutes. That's not under normal circumstances. That's barely even a stint for the prototype. So very much a sprint format. Very much just going for it lap after lap to try and make the most of it. And to work your way forward. Bit of a fight here we've got for P5 as well. We've got Marcis Putnik's versus the car just in behind him of the number 7 machine of Corol. Very, very close indeed. And again, top 5, it's a position you're going to want to fight for. P5 just sounds better than P6.
And it counts on the stats as well. If you look on your profile stats, you get a little top 5 stat. So I'm sure you'd always want to finish in there if you care about those sorts of things. So like you say, it's always one to fight for, and yeah, I think we're seeing quite a few little close battles across the field. Our leading positions are rather unchallenged, especially surprisingly in the GT3 classes. We see a move there for the inside. The 180-degree corner, named 180 degree. What a creative name. Like we've not talked about actually already. Some of the names at this track are rather interesting, but still really close, and I'm still sure that we'll probably see this battle continue for the remaining laps.
I'm sure we will indeed. And yeah, 180 degrees, creative but literal, fair enough. It's better than what the Americans can do with their, turn 1A, turn 1B. You know my feelings on it. Well, I'm very passionate as to what that is. I'm sorry to any Americans in the chat, but I just do not get your corner names. I think, no, I'm not. I really am not. I'm very unapologetically passionate about the corner names. It doesn't make sense. But anyway, we digress because we're at Magny-Cours. We're not an American track, so, it's whatever. The French, they're the French. But at least they can literally name their corners quite well. I mean, it's saying that they have got a straight name chicane, so we can't praise them too much.
That is true.
That does pull the Americans back into things just a little bit. But anyway, before I get myself slaughtered by the YouTube chat or on Twitter after the race, we'll focus back in on the actual racing action because we are ticked under halfway left to go. 21 minutes and 45 seconds left in this race, and still a lot of stuff left to materialize. Still a lot of questions to be answered because for Grandi, Robin Berge has kept him honest. That gap has remained sort of 2.5 around that margin for the majority of this race. It wouldn't take much at all for that number 8 machine to be in contention for the lead.
Well, yeah, you say that, but if you don't remember, Berge started from 8th, didn't qualify, didn't have any qualifying time on the board, and to be starting in that position and now fighting for the lead potentially. It was 1.9 seconds last time around. It has grown to nearly 3 this time around, but we're seeing how that gap's ebbing and flowing with the traffic giveth and taketh thing away. But I think with pit stops around the corner, we could see perhaps an upset as Berge sets on his charge to try and lead this race.
Yeah, he's going to want to do that. I mean, it's always satisfying to not be able to put in a lap in qualifying and just charge your way through the field. It's so much fun as well. It's just like, especially, I guess, if you are quick like Bergie is, it's just like, cool, sweet, dart my way up the inside of you, then focus on the next guy. Just pick them off one by one by one. So last and first challenges are a lot of fun. So I'm sure Bergie is loving life. That is Halloween, having a bit of an upset into the heavy braking zone. Again, I don't know as to what's happened then. Maybe just a little bit of a distraction, focus back onto his screen and realised, hang about, I need to brake now, and just went in way too deep, unfortunately for him. And that is, going to be a bit of an upset in terms of him. But I guess, again, easily done as the attrition of this race starts to settle in as well.
Yeah, and opting to go into the pit lane now as well for the GDD driver. 3 of them are actually. It looks like the round of pit stops is coming up now. But like you say, that corner is such a heavy braking zone and such a sharp corner that even by missing your braking point by even 25 meters could cause that to happen. And it shows you how on it you always have to be and how consistent you have to be. And like you say, just a small mistake can cost you a lot of time, as it did for Halloween.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, in motorsport, it's the finest of margins. Like I always, of course, do automotive at college and things. And when we're talking about engines and wheel alignment and things, the margins are so slim. You're talking, 0.005 of a degree or 1 degree of caster or camber or toe or anything like that, and that can make such a big upset. We are talking minimal margins in this industry, so you really do have to be on it, and it's very easy for those things to go wrong. Speaking though of fights, very, very close as Petit tries to hang on to 4th and work his way through with the traffic to hang on to that as they work their way in towards Adelaide. Again, using his situation to the best of his ability, I think he's been able to get ahead of Jürgen de Halloween and hang on to that 4th place. But yeah, again, the margins are just so slim, particularly again at a circuit like Magny-Cours, where it's not a modern layout at all, anything like that. It is just, it's you've got what you're given, and if you exceed that, then well, you're in trouble.
Yeah, and like you say, it's an interesting dynamic to have, and I think we'll still see a lot of changes throughout this race with just under 20 minutes to go. That's still going to be another 10 laps of this punishing circuit. So I think we could see still quite a few changes, although our lead battles do look to be opening up that little bit as we see Sean Bennett either getting out of the way or just making a mistake into the 180-degree corner named 180 degrees. And yeah, that's not ideal considering what we saw happen earlier, and the damage to the front of that Lamborghini definitely doesn't help.
Will Chadwick, ladies and gents, is not letting it go. 180-degree corner named 180 degrees. He will carry that on, I think, for the rest of his iRacing quote-unquote career, provided he wakes up for the races. Sean Bennett, though, taking a lot of curb going into that very fast right-hander. Sausage curbs are lethal, and unfortunately that has sent the car well and truly into a spiral, sent him almost nosediving into the barrier, using the runoff of the circuit, or what little there was, straight into the pit lane, understandably so, for what I'm going to guess is a retirement. If I was Sean Bennett, I would not be continuing on, but to each their own. He has not had the kindest of races here at Magny-Cours.
And it's that corner again, it's that fast left-right, or right-left I should say. It looks like it really unsettles these GTD cars, and just with a small imperfection in your line, you can really get fired off into that barrier, and it shows the challenges of this track as we watch 2 more Audi GTDs race through there.
Yeah, they are, again, just going at it, I think, is the only turn. This is the fight between Vahabovic, and he's got Petit just in behind him as well in a fight for what is overall P8 in their class is better, and Remidis just in behind him, 2 Audis, so no excuses, Will. There's no balance of performance differences, there's no chassis differences, no engines, none of that. tweaks to the setup, but majority of this is going to come down to the driver and who is going to be brave and negotiating through Magny-Cours. Back to this fight though between some of the BMWs. We've got Sergey Soldatov trying to get a move done versus Dylan Frackleton for 4th place. A lot of ways to divert our attention, but into the pit lane, in fact, interestingly, comes Frackleton. So well and truly amongst the pit lane sequence, it's getting busy out on track.
Yeah, it's getting really busy here as we're seeing cars go left, right and centre. We're watching LMDHs try and go around the outside, and that's why Frackleton pit probably. You're thinking, coming around to the time that the LMDHs need to pit in order to make it to the end of this race, you know, Sodadovic got slowed down there, so I think that we could see maybe an overcut potentially, and that's partially when you balance your pit stops with inside these races, because you've got to take into account what traffic you're coming up on, because you do lose a lot of time, as we mentioned before, in these traffic sequences, and yeah, it gets very hectic, and you've got to balance your strategy around that.
There's no set algorithm to when you come into the pit lane. It's not as clear cut as, okay, do X amount of time, come in, do this, because you have to analyze as to what's going on the circuit around you. Like you said, you need to see, okay, this does not look fun to go through. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to cut my losses. I'm going to get out of this as soon as I can, come into the pit lane and get some clear out, get away from this, because then you can make some time relative to those around you. Because 3 wide on the exit of a corner is not ideal for any of these guys whatsoever. And it's just not fun. It's not where you want to be. So come into the pit lane, get your stuff done, get all sorted, and then get some clear air, push and get away from the overwhelming nature of endurance. Oh my word, there is the 26, big off on the exit of the final corner, straight into the side of a fellow prototype, nearly into the side of the GTD as well. He's lost his front nose cone straight back. Oh no, actually he's going to carry on. That is Stasveski in the 26 and pulling off to the right hand side of the circuit, escaping back to the pit lane. That was a big off, but you saw it coming from a mile away. It was that first initial snap that just set him off on that domino effect of catching it once, catching it twice, and then the car just said no.
Yeah, and that was a huge snap of oversteer. And again, must commend it, parked near the marshal's post. I'm loving everyone's coordination today. But yeah, big snap of oversteer, lost the whole front fender, and that's race over, unfortunately. And it shows you how one moment of small mistake can just have such a big effect.
It flashes before your eyes. It's literally just, okay, I'm going into this corner, everything's normal, and then the span of 1, 2, 3 seconds, your whole race just unfolds and it just completely turns on its head. It only takes one snap. We're going to see on board with Telesom Damien as to exactly what happened just in front of him, I believe. I'm going to go with it's Polish that had the off into the final corner based on his name. But Damien, of course, is not in this race anymore. We'll ride on board, and it's just literally a little bit too wide. Bang! He managed, I think, Damien, to avoid that really, really well. Overall, as an overall negotiation, was able to react to that really well and not lose too much time. But for the driver involved, that unfortunately did, collect himself and ruin his race. If that was a solo spin, fine. He would have shrugged it off and carried on. But because it was so busy around him, it was a lot worse out for him. This is exactly what could have happened. Massaro having a spin off the exit of the final corner, able to just carry on like nothing's happened. But again, it's that thing. It's the same incident, but very different consequences.
Yeah, and sometimes you get lucky. And sometimes you might be able to catch it and just avoid that incident with pure talent, which is obviously the option I'd always go for.
Not rely.
Yeah, no, exactly. I'd always go for it. It's pure talent. Got to give these drivers the benefit of the doubt. But yeah, like you say, it also depends on the class. Like you say, the GTDs are, at least on power, a lot easier to drive. Actually, they get away from the corner a lot easier than an LMP2 at least. And like you say, it's just a small little bump, but because of the relatively low speed, and of course going to the left-hand side towards the tyre barrier, there's not going to be hardly any damage sustained there with how the barriers, how tyre barriers act in iRacing. They're a lot softer of a surface than a hard concrete wall, which would make sense.
It would indeed. iRacing, the pinnacle, of course, of simulators, does know that tyre barriers are a little bit softer than concrete ones. Bit of a fight here, though, in the P2s. Valentin Bonney trying to hang on to what is now P3, I believe. Ahead of Coirel. Of course, we saw Valentin Bonney towards the front end of this pack, Undercut Sim Racing 1, 2, and 3. As they came into sort of the majority part, you can see Adrian Ladinger and Marian Andre 1 and 2 as it stands. Valentin Bonney now gets himself up into third place to complete the 1, 2, and 3 for Undercut Sim Racing. But all three teammates have been very close on pace, very close in terms of track position. And now with Ladinger into the pit lane, it's a race against time for Bonney to try and beat his teammate out.
Yeah, and like you say, we're also seeing the LMDH leader into the pit lane as well. And actually, something we didn't quite catch on camera, I don't think, unless I'm blind, which is definitely a possibility. Filippo Grandi had a huge incident with a GTD car, and that does let Bergie take over the lead of this race. So that's another interesting one as we watch Boney come across the start-finish line. Does he get his teammate? I don't quite think so. I think we just saw him go through Estoril just ahead. So yeah, it looks like Ladinger has retained the lead, and it's a rather sizable one at that.
Yeah, 5.5 seconds. You take that for sure for a nice, comfortable lead out in front. Of course, cannot get complacent. 10 minutes left to go. This is... It's where things can go very wrong because, of course, for Ladinger, it's like, oh my god, finally, final 10, I can count down, I can look forward to the checkered flag to round off this victory. But then you start to, you're towards the end, the tyres are worn, you're worn out from driving and dealing with the pressure of leading the way. And again, as we've seen time and time again, it only takes one tiny thing to go wrong for everything to go wrong. This is what we're going to see with our for the majority of the part, very dominant, very clean, very seamless leader of Filippo Grandi. But coming into the next right-hander, just sent one to the inside of the P2. You have to say that is completely and utterly on him. But it's an unfortunate one at that, because for how good his race has gone, it was a small misjudgment that has now put him, 16.5 seconds off the race lead.
Yeah, and it shows you how fine margins, again, as we've talked about across the course of this race, can lead to big consequences. And like you say, what we would predicted to be an easy, dominant leader of this race and winner is now ends up in second, 16.5 seconds off. So, like you say, I think we also need to give Bergie the credit of coming from 8th place to be within such a close striking distance of Grandi, putting him under pressure. And like you say, just that bit of pressure, just that bit of urgency needing to make the passes stick, and that's what's caused the incident.
Another replay, Christopher Underwood trying to he's under pressure, you can see there, from the fellow BMW, or just loops it around on the rear end, tags the fellow BMW as well for good measure. These cars, these prototypes are, again, like the majority of the field we've seen, so fragile, so easy to go wrong. He looked comfortable going in. It didn't look too out of the ordinary in terms of pace, in terms of the speed he was going into that corner. But something must have gone wrong. Must have hit a bump or gone over the curb or something to just bottom out that car, send the rear end round. And it was a fairly hefty incident again. And unfortunately, adding to that was the fact that he was closely followed by someone on track. And straight away, that did put him, unfortunately, onto the back foot. But this is a good little fight we've got going on here. Patrick Burns fighting with, as it stands, Piotr Cesarello for P7. The closest fight for the P2s as it stands. They've sort of spread themselves out a little bit. Can Patrick Bruns, sorry, I've been saying Burns, it's Bruns, Patrick Bruns in the 27 machine, get himself up into 7th, because for the majority of the P2s, some of them really haven't had good days, so, to seal off for the 7th wouldn't be too bad. A good little fight there between the two Audis and the GTDs as well.
Yeah, like you say, there's been a few little battles here. Like, we've seen the P2s kind of spread themselves out a little bit more than you'd expect. Of course, there you go, traffic splitting them up a little bit, and that's going to make that gap grow ever more, just a little bit. And actually getting really stuck here is the number 27, and that's Bruns is gonna struggle a little bit there. So losing only about 0.4 of a second, actually, providing that runners can get past these 2 GTDs on this straight. So not too bad, but it shows you that how traffic can make a difference straight away. But like going to what we were talking about before with the LMD8, just hitting that bump, it's always a fine margin because you're pushing the car to the edge of the tyre at all points in time in order to maintain maximum speed and obviously hit the best lap times you can. And it's just that fine little margin, one bump, one little mistake, and that's it. As we see the GTD go very deep there in the battle. So yeah, it's all kicking off really.
Yeah, you wait long enough for a burst and 2 will come at once, and that is exactly the theme of this race. As soon as we get to the back end of sort of a long explanatory point, it all just kicks off, and it's like, okay, these guys are going side by side, oh, and these guys are going side by side as well. It's fantastic. It's a lot to keep up with. But yeah, we've got Petit, Avramdis, and of course Vahabovic fighting on in these 2 Audis. Avramdis unfortunately going in a little bit too deep under the brakes, but now able to bounce back off that, maybe on the run in towards Adelaide. You can see Vahabovic going defensive to the right hand side. Through the middle goes the P2. Now to the outside does the white Audi. Is he going to be able to get the up and under potentially? Maybe swamped by the P2 coming through. And yeah, he's just not quite got the relative speed compared to the fellow Audi. And that's the thing, is that there's that prototype Valentin Boni P2 in the LMP2 category, making a bit of an upset for him there because he wasn't able to visualize that move as best as he would have wanted to. Fortunately though, for Avramdis, he's still very, very close, still very, very feisty, and still very much in this fight for 7th.
Yeah, and like you say, it really showed there. Or as we see, I didn't know that was going to happen then. That's a very, very scary corner to go for a manoeuvre at. But like you saw there, the P2s are so slow off the corner. The Dallara P217, it's notorious for having a very intrusive traction control and also not having a lot of traction in general. And as you can see off the hairpin, the difference in traction between a GTD car and a P2 car is quite a lot, really.
It's my understanding the P2s don't have traction control or anything, do they? So
I think they do.
Do they?
I've been haunted by the brrr sound that it always makes. It's quite haunting. I'm almost certain they do have traction control. They don't have ABS though, for sure.
Ah, fair enough. Okay. Again, that is just what was firing on all cylinders. Oh my word, there's Leon Blum having a massive old spin. A corner has been notorious. As we see in the bottom right of screen, you can see Avramdis trying to make the move versus Vahabovic. As we see Blum trying to rejoin the circuit, not really made the best of his run, and that's of course promoted Maximilian Brabos up into 2nd place. Dummy and diving, trying to find the gap is the white Audi. Once again trying to go for the up and under. Vahabovic goes in deep. That's going to invite Avramdis through. Fight for 7th side by side as they exit through Adelaide, and now dipping down towards the next sequence of corners. It's once again Vahabovic on the outside. Is he going to be able to hang it? Not quite. And Petr Avramdis up into 7th place in spectacular fashion. He was ducking and diving, trying to find the space, committed to a line, and Vahabovic, too focused on defending the inside, left his marks open on the exit.
That was incredible. They were so close through Estoril. I don't think I've ever seen drivers rub on each other so much with inside an online racing simulator. That was unbelievably close and actually quite hard, but very, very fair racing in the end, just about. And yeah, fantastic little battlers. We're looking at Lindinger, who's
lost the lead.
He's lost the lead.
So what's happened?
Oh, this already looks bad. It's 3 classes all in one.
I don't like this all in a bit.
Oh no!
Oh my word, that is not great. That was the poor Lamborghini. That was not Leidinger's fault whatsoever. He had no part in that. Of course, yes, it was very hectic. Oh my word, that rejoin though, very, very sketchy for the Undercut Sim Racing. And of course, we've got the team in the YouTube chat. They've been watching along with this race. Very, very proud to know that Valentin Boni, Adrian Leidinger, and Marian Andre 1, 2, and 3 on track. But for Leidinger to get involved in that is, as Lewis McGlade would say, very suboptimal. Which again, I've just restarted. Is not Lewis McGlade's thing. But I'm going to coin it off him anyway. Adrian Leidinger. You can't feel anything other than sympathy, empathy for him. Oh my word, that is a very sideways P2. Oh my word, that is actually collected. Valentin Boni, oh my word! Oh my word! Adrian Leidinger and Valentin Boni both come together after contact with another P2, and Boni is going way backwards onto the circuit, trying to find space to bring it back round. We're going to have to take another look at that because drama, chaos, carnage, whatever you want to write describe this scene with 1 minute and 40 seconds left to go. The two teammates making contact. It was a dramatic event that caused the lead change in the first place. It's another one that's caused it once more. I'm at a loss for words here, Will. I don't know how to describe that other than just, yeah, it happened.
I am utterly shocked at what I've just seen. We've seen two teammates collide, not really from faults of their own, I don't think, but that's crazy that just happened right in front of our eyes as we were talking about undercut sim racing. That's definitely your fault, I think, to be honest, Zach, because you were the one mentioning it. So,
mate, if you're talking about commentator's curse, there's no such thing, only bad driving. And unfortunately, that was bad driving on the part of the very fluorescent LMP2. Valentin Bonney just went for a good old pirouette a couple of times. Undercut sim racing, if you're interested in Bally, get Bonney on it. He's smashing it. I do love, though, how through all of that, it's still Ladinger that leads the P2s. I just find that hilarious.
Yeah, but Bonney has lost his P3 now down into the hairpin and has got a lot of damage to nurse to the end of this race. So to even finish in like P5, 6 would be a good achievement, as we see another replay of that, well, what you seem to call a ballet session, what I would call the commentator's curse from Zach Sweeney.
Whatever. Commentator's coincidence, mate. It's a coincidence I was talking about it, all right? It just doesn't roll off the tongue as well. Again, yeah, it's not my fault. It's not my fault they just can't get good. No, I'll stop ripping into them because, again, I'm sure they're lovely people. But yeah, that is such a shame for Valentin Bonney, because he was gifted that position, was just like, yeah, sweet, I'm back into the lead, and then not even half a lap later, bang, and he's lost it again. That honestly is just so unfortunate. You have to feel for them in its entirety. We are now on to the final lap of this race, though. Robin Berge will lead by 37.7 seconds ahead of Filippo Grandi. Robin Berge, star of the field. I thought Grandi was going to run away with this. Berge, though, he's kept it firm. He's kept it in control. He's done a fantastic job.
Yeah, and Grandi obviously miscalculated his pit stop or something, because he's had to come in again for, I think fuel. So yeah, like you say, Berge from 8th place on the grid has done a fantastic job, and yeah, amazing drive.
Yeah, only a couple more corners left to go. He'll see the checkered flag first. He'll win week number 5 of Friday Night Prime Time for the BMW M Hybrid V8. Is Robin Berge from P8 on the grid to see the checkered flag first. What a drive from the number 8 machine. It'll be Adrian Ladinger somehow for Undercut Sim Racing to come across the line in a few moments' time to take the victory for the LMP2s. It's Laurent Van Oort, though, for the GTDs and the very fluorescent, very vibrant Lamborghini to see the checkered flag first to take victory. He'll be followed by Maximilian Prevost in a fellow Lamborghini. A very short run to the line. A good drive from the number 5 machine to see him in 2nd place on the podium, following Leon Blum's bit of a shambles towards the latter stages of that race. Only a couple more corners left to go for Adrian Ladinger, and what a drive it has been for Undercut. As a team, they've really come into this race with such a prowess. Unfortunately, towards the latter stage, didn't quite go their way, but despite the hardships, it is going to be Ladinger who takes P1 for the Dallara P217s here at Magny-Cours. Again, what a fantastic drive. It'll be Loris Coirol who will round off the podium. Marion Andre will be sandwiched in between the pair of them in 2nd place. But, Will, I'm impressed. I'm liking IMSA. I could definitely get used to this.
Yeah, absolutely. And we saw a lot of action there, didn't we? And I think at least those last 10 minutes went so fast with all the carnage and craziness that unfolded. But yeah, congratulations to everyone that got on the podium, and especially Berge, because I really didn't expect that to happen, especially starting 8th on the grid. And I think it's a fantastic drive.
I think so, indeed. I will thoroughly agree with you. While he didn't quite get the fastest lap, he did take the victory by nearly 40 seconds ahead of Filippo Grandi. Mario Veyron will round off the podium with Angus Martin and Sergei Soldatov. The top 5, Kenji Freckleton and Damien, P6, 7, and 8, with Christopher Underwood, P9, I believe, rounding off the LMDH grid. Of course, 3 drivers not making it to the checkered flag. Unfortunately, it wasn't the best time in the office for the BMWs. But hey, they managed to trunk on, and those that did finish did deserve to do quite well indeed. indeed. Moving on to the Dallara P217s, Adrian Ladinger brings home an undercut sim racing 1-2 at a teammate Marian Andre, who would have been shocked to find out as to what happened to his fellow teammates. Loris Curao gets gifted the final place on the podium ahead of Valentin Bonney, who is going to be very upset to finish 21.5 seconds off the race lead, despite going into the final lap, potentially even leading it. Marcus Sputniks rounds off the top 5 with the 33 machine in 6th. Patrick Bruns, P7, with Piotr Kryslow, the Scandinavian, in P8. Stasevsky rounds off in P9 with Frederick Anderson, 22 laps down. So again, the bottom 3 of the LMP2s not making it to the checker flag in full force. Yeah, again, that is a testament to how difficult this race was here at Magny-Cours. One class left to go, and it was Lawrence Van Oort that brought home the GTDs. Maximilian Prevost continues to impress in Friday night prime time in second place, with Leon Blum, unfortunately, rounding off the final place on the podium. That is going to be a bittersweet ending to this week for him, with Tommaso Citti, Avramdis, the top 5. Then comes Sabit Vahabovic, a good comeback for the number 18 machine, it must be said. Masero P7, Hitzman P8, Sentuk and Jürgen Halunen, your top 10 for the GTDs. A quite extensive list in terms of the GTDs, but you can see there Harley Keeble, Sean Bennett, Leo Develay, and Christ Jensen all unable to complete the final few laps of that race. Well, that is the results. That, of course, rounds off the action for IMSA. We go again in Daytona in a week's time. Will, of course, all goes well with Cam, you won't be joining us back in the commentary booth for this one, but just looking forward, it's Daytona. It's sort of the precinct to the weekend of the Daytona 24 that we have got here on RaceSpotTV. It's going to be a good one.
Well, yeah, it's always going to be a huge race. Obviously, like you say, being just before the start of the 24 hours, less than 12 hours before that is, and it's going to be the last chance really for teams to prepare for the race. Of course, one of the, if not the biggest special event in the iRacing calendar year, and yeah, it's going to be a really good grid, I imagine, next time out in the IMSA online sports car series.
For sure. So get it in your calendars, January 20th, 2023. Same time, of course, 8:45 p.m. GMT. You'll be back for Friday night prime time at the Daytona International Speedway for the IMSA iRacing Series. It's been myself, Zach Sweeney, Will Chadwick, Iku Merikala to talk you through and broadcast you all the fantastic action that we had on display here at Magny-Cours. In a week's time, we'll go for round 6. The catalyst maybe to a fantastic weekend of racing here at the Daytona International Speedway. But until then, take care and goodbye.